Your life as a child chimney sweep. You're 6 years old, standing on a London street in the year 1860, when a man in a soot-black coat crouches down to your level and tells your mother he'll give her 2 shillings for you. Your mother looks at the coins. Then she looks at you. Then she looks at the coins again. She takes the money. You don't understand what's happening. You're too young to understand what's happening. You reach back for her hand, and it isn't there anymore. You turn around, and she's already walking away, back the way you came, getting smaller with every step. You call her name. She doesn't turn around. The man's name is your master now. You don't call him anything else. He doesn't offer his first name, and you don't ask. Within 24 hours, you've already learned that asking questions that aren't about the work is a waste of everyone's time, and wasting the master's time is something you don't do twice. You're a climbing boy. Your first lesson isn't about chimneys, it's about size. You're small enough to fit where adults can't go, small enough to be useful, small enough that the master chose you over the taller boy standing next to you on that street corner. For the first time in your life, being small feels like something valuable, like something that makes you matter. You won't feel that way for long. The chimney flues in London are sometimes as narrow as 9 inches across. 9 inches. Less than the width of your shoulders, which means your shoulders have to be angled, twisted, body contorted into shapes that boys' bodies were not built to hold. You go up with your back against one wall and your feet against the other, knees bent, elbows out, pushing upward inch by inch, while soot rains down your face and into your eyes and mouth and ears. The darkness is total. You can't see your own hands. You navigate entirely by feel. The texture of brick under your palms, the angle of the flue, the sound of your own breathing bouncing off walls that are close enough to touch on all sides simultaneously. The first time you panic. Of course you panic. You can't see. You can barely breathe. The walls press in from all sides, and the only direction that feels safe is down. But down means failing, and failing means consequences you haven't fully learned about yet. The master is below you, watching, and above you there is nothing but darkness and the scrape of your own elbows against gritty brick. You keep climbing. It takes everything you have to keep climbing. You're learning your first lesson. Fear is something you climb through, not around. The chimney doesn't care how scared you are. The darkness doesn't negotiate. The soot doesn't apologize. You either go up or you don't, and not going up has consequences that are worse than going up. So you go up. The work starts at 3 in the morning. London's flues need to be clean before the morning fires are lit, which means you and the other boys shuffle through dark streets while the city sleeps, the master leading the way with his sack of tools and his list of addresses. The city looks different at 3 in the morning, quieter, stranger. Like the whole of London belongs to ghosts and chimney sweeps and no one else. You sweep 30 chimneys before breakfast. 30. Up and down, across rooftops, through servants' entrances, past confused kitchen maids who look at you like you're something that crawled out from the walls. By the time you see bread and butter for the first time each day, your arms are shaking so badly you can barely hold the slice. Your knees and elbows are raw. You can feel soot in your teeth, in the creases of your knuckles, in the corners of your eyes. A boy who complains gets nothing. A boy who falls behind gets left. You figure this out without anyone having to say it directly. You stop complaining after the second day. At 7, the wounds on your elbows and knees have finally grown calluses. Thick, tough, discolored patches of skin that look more like leather than anything that belongs on a child's body. This is considered an improvement. The master tells you so in approximately those words. He sounds almost proud, which is the closest thing to praise you'll hear from him in 5 years. What he doesn't tell you is that underneath the calluses, the damage to your joints and bones has already begun. Damage that works slowly, invisibly, reshaping the structure of you in ways that won't become obvious until the shape of you has already changed permanently. You notice one morning that you can't fully straighten your legs when you stand. Your knees refuse to lock all the way out. You look at the older boys in the cellar and you see that most of them can't either. You don't mention it. You add it to the list of things you don't mention, which is getting long. One morning in autumn, you think it's autumn, it's hard to track seasons when every day looks the same. The master sends you up a chimney that hasn't fully cooled from the previous night's fire. You feel the heat before you're 3 feet up. You stop. The bricks are warm. Not burning, not yet. But warm in the way that means they were very recently much hotter. And the ash at the bottom of the flue is still glowing faintly in places if you look directly down. The master taps his rod against the flue wall below you. The signal to keep moving. You keep moving. The bricks scorch your hands. Not immediately. First there's just warmth, then discomfort, then the sharp clarity of actual pain. Your knees, without the protection of calluses on this particular patch of skin, blister almost immediately on contact with the walls. You climb fast because slow means more contact with the burning surfaces. At the top, you brush and scrape with hands that feel like they're wrapped in fire. And you try not to think about the descent, which will be worse because you'll have to press against the same walls again on the way down. Nobody asks how your hands are afterward. The chimney is clean. The master has another address. You wrap your palms in strips of rag and move to the next house. You're learning your second lesson. Your pain is someone else's inconvenience. Not cruelty exactly, just indifference, which is its own kind of cruelty. The chimney is clean. That's what matters. You are the instrument that cleaned it. Instruments don't need to be asked how they're feeling. At 8, you share a cellar with 4 other boys. Climbing boys, all of them, ranging from your age down to a 5-year-old who arrived last month and still cries at night when he thinks no one can hear him. You can hear him. Everyone can hear him. Nobody says anything because there is nothing useful to say. You remember crying at night yourself in those first weeks, pressing your face against your arm so the sound wouldn't carry. It felt important even when it changed nothing. It was the only private thing you had. The master is not the worst kind. You know this because older boys have told you about worse. About masters who hold burning paper under boys' feet inside the chimney to make them climb faster when they're moving too slowly. About boys who got stuck and were simply left. The master moving on to the next chimney, the household unaware, the boy eventually rescued or not. About the boy 2 streets over whose master reported his death to the coroner as accidental and had a new climbing boy by the following Tuesday. Your master is not the worst kind. He feeds you enough to keep you useful. He doesn't beat you unless you're slow or careless with his equipment. He allows you to sleep a full 4 hours on Sundays, which is the one day of the year the climbing boys have off, a tradition so old that on May Day, the boys in London streets sometimes dance, just because they can, just because their feet are on the ground and not on a flue wall. You consider yourself fortunate for having a master who isn't the worst kind. That's the most heartbreaking thing about your life. The bar you've been given to measure your fortune against. At 9, you get stuck. Not for long, but long enough to understand something about yourself that you'll carry for the rest of your life. It's a narrow flue in a wealthy house in Mayfair. Fancier brickwork than you're used to, sharper angles, less forgiving tolerances. You've been doing this for 3 years. You know how to read a chimney, how to feel the width of a flue before committing your weight, how to judge a turn. You're not careless. You're not rushing. And yet, you're turning a bend when something shifts. Your elbow catches wrong against a protrusion in the brickwork. Your body rotates slightly in the wrong direction, and suddenly you can't go forward and can't go back. Your knees lock up under your chin. Your arms are pinned at an angle that gives you almost no leverage. The walls press in from all four sides, and you are perfectly, completely, absolutely stuck. You don't scream. Screaming uses air, and air is already limited. You don't thrash. Thrashing would wedge you in worse. You stay very still and very calm in the way that only children who have spent 3 years training themselves not to panic can manage. You breathe slowly. You count your breaths. You think about the angle of your left arm and whether moving it 2 inches to the right would help or hurt. You think carefully, methodically, in the dark, in the soot, in the silence. It takes 11 minutes for the master to realize something is wrong, that the scraping sounds have stopped, that there's no response to his voice from above. He shouts up from below. You manage a single word, stuck. They pull bricks from the wall to reach you. It takes another 30 minutes to create a gap large enough to pull you through. You don't cry when they pull you out. You sit on the floor of the fine Mayfair hallway, the homeowner watching from a distance with an expression that is more inconvenience than concern, and you breathe air that has no walls around it. Then you stand up, check that your limbs work, and tell the master you're ready to continue. You go back to work the following morning. You're learning your 3rd lesson. Surviving is not the same as being safe. It just means you get to try again tomorrow. And trying again tomorrow is, in the world you live in, the closest thing to hope that exists. At 10, your body has grown. Not dramatically, not in any way that people on the street would notice, but enough. The master notices. He starts sending the 5-year-old up certain flues that you used to handle. The ones with the tightest bends, the narrowest passages, the sharpest angles. You watch the small boy disappear into the darkness, and you feel something you don't have a word for yet. Something between relief and grief. Relief that it isn't you. Grief that it is him. And underneath both of those, a slow, heavy knowledge that you're watching yourself from 3 years ago go up a chimney, and you couldn't stop it then, and you can't stop it now. At 11, the master calls you aside after the morning round. He tells you you've grown too large. He gives you a pair of worn boots that belong to a previous boy. You don't ask what happened to him. And 3 shillings and opens the door. You stand on the street, 3 shillings in your hand, boots on your feet, a persistent cough in your chest that wakes you up at night, a spine that hasn't been properly straight since you were 8, eyes that are always slightly red from years of soot irritation, hands that look 20 years older than the rest of you, 11 years old, free technically for the first time since you were 6. Freedom at 11 looks like this. No food, no shelter, no family you can locate, no skills that anyone will pay you for, except the one skill that requires you to be smaller than you currently are. The streets of London are full of boys like you, thrown out by masters when they grew too large, knowing only chimneys, too old for the work and too young for almost everything else. You spend the first week sleeping in doorways. You're cold. You're hungry. You cough constantly. You watch the other street children and you understand, with a clarity that surprises you, that this is not the worst thing that has happened to you. You've been in darker places than a doorway. You've survived worse discomfort than cold air. You know how to be very still and very calm and wait for things to change. Things change. A woman finds you on the 7th day. Not a miracle, just a woman with a clipboard in a quiet, practical manner and a connection to one of the city's ragged schools, charity schools set up specifically for children like you, the foundlings and orphans and discarded, offering reading and arithmetic to anyone willing to sit still long enough to learn. You are 10 years behind every child in that classroom. You sit at a desk with children half your size, and you learn the letters of the alphabet at 11 years old, sounding them out the way the 5-year-olds do, your calloused finger tracing shapes on the page that everyone around you has known for years. You are not ashamed. Shame is a luxury, and you spent your entire childhood spending all your available energy on surviving, and that is not something to be ashamed of. It is something to survive past. At 14, you can read. Not well, not fluently, not quickly, but enough. Enough to sound out a newspaper headline, enough to read a sign, enough to understand a contract before you sign it. This feels to you like the most extraordinary thing you have ever accomplished, because you did it in 3 years, starting from nothing, while working long hours in a factory and sleeping in a rented corner of a room with 4 other men. You find work in a factory at 12. Legal work, paid work, above ground and light you can see by, with a foreman who is quick to anger but doesn't send anyone up a burning flue. The hours are long, and the pay is small, and the air inside is thick with its own kind of dust. But you can see the door from where you stand. You can walk out of it. That alone feels like something close to paradise. Your lungs cough at night. They will cough for the rest of your life. The soot has been inside you since you were 6 years old. Inside your lungs, your airways, the tissues that were still developing when you first went up that first chimney. Doctors, when you eventually see one in your early 20s, use a word you have to ask them to repeat. Occupational, meaning the job did this, meaning your body carries the permanent record of 5 years of work that should never have been yours to do, meaning nobody stopped it for a very long time because chimneys needed cleaning and children were small enough to fit. At 16, you read about a man named Lord Shaftesbury in a newspaper. You read about a bill being debated in Parliament, about a push to finally enforce the laws that have theoretically protected climbing boys since 1840. Laws that have existed on paper for 20 years and been ignored on paper for 20 years because the fine for using children as chimney sweeps was so small that masters simply paid it and went on using children. At 20, you have a small room, a steady factory job, a persistent cough that the doctor says will not improve, a spine that curves slightly to the left, calloused hands, red-rimmed eyes, a reading ability that took 3 years of exhausted evenings to build from nothing, and a piece of paper that says you can read. In a different world, you would have had all of this at 6 instead of a chimney flue and a master's 2 shillings and 5 years of darkness. But the world you were born into needed its chimneys clean, and you were small enough to be useful, and no one for a very long time thought that was worth stopping. You think about the 5-year-old in the cellar sometimes. You never asked his name. There was an unspoken rule among the boys. Names were too much like caring, and caring was too much like hoping, and hoping was too heavy to carry up a chimney at 3 in the morning. You hope he made it to 11. You hope someone found him on the 7th day too. So you survived one of history's most brutal childhoods. But don't get comfortable. Click the next video and discover your life as a WWI trench soldier, where at least nobody sends you into a chimney. They just send you over the top and hope for the best.